In my late 20s, I worked as a security guard at a busy hotel in Las Vegas. The pay was much better than most jobs I could get nearby, but the unpredictable schedule was really frustrating. I had shifts that changed from mornings to evenings to nights, making it hard to get enough sleep. Still, the money kept me going. One night, while working a late shift, I was at the front desk talking with two coworkers. It was around 11 p.m., and my shift ended at midnight. While we were chatting, the phone on the desk rang. I saw it was from one of the hotel rooms, so I picked it up and asked how I could help. A man's voice came through, sounding very worried. He said something strange was happening in a room down the hall and that he was scared. I asked for more details, but he just insisted I come quickly. I noted the room number and told him I would send security right away, meaning myself. After explaining the odd call to my coworkers, I took the elevator to the floor where the caller's room was. As I walked down the hallway, it was eerily quiet. I expected to hear something, but there was nothing. I also thought the caller might be waiting by the door, but it was closed. I knocked loudly and announced that I was hotel security. There was no answer. After a minute, I walked to the end of the hallway, listening for any unusual sounds. I returned to the door and knocked again, this time more urgently. Just then, a door opened nearby, and an older woman asked if I was security. I said yes and asked if she had heard any strange noises or knew anything about the call. She looked scared and said she had heard loud sounds in the hallway a few minutes earlier but didn't know what caused them. Feeling more nervous, I grabbed my walkie-talkie and asked the front desk to call the room again to see if anyone answered. After a tense wait, they told me there was no response. I stood there, unsure of what to do, and asked them to check who was registered in that room. After a long wait, they told me that no one was booked in that room for the night. Confused and uneasy, I used my security key card to open the door. The room looked clean and unused, but something felt off. I searched every corner and found nothing unusual. Then, I noticed the phone. I checked the serial number and hurried back to the lobby. At my desk, I looked up the security records to see if there were any calls made from that room. I found a record of a call to the front desk, the one I had answered about 15 minutes earlier. The hotel didn't record calls, so I couldn't get more information, but it was clear that someone had been in that empty room without permission. The situation got more serious in the following days when a guest on that same floor was reported missing by a family member who was staying in another room. We reviewed the security footage of all entrances and exits, and it showed that the missing person had last been seen leaving the hotel alone a couple of hours before my strange call. Whether the two incidents were connected is still a mystery, but the whole situation left me feeling uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that the caller's urgent plea was linked to something serious, maybe even a kidnapping. To this day, we don't know who the caller was, and the missing person has not been found. The experience still haunts me, reminding me that there can be dark things hidden behind the bright lights of Las Vegas. Last year, I went on a business trip and stayed at a hotel that my company paid for. The hotel looked nice inside, but it was smaller than most, with only about 30 to 40 rooms spread over 3 stories. My room was on the top floor, so I took the elevator up and walked down the hallway. I put my bags down by the door and reached into my pocket for the room key. Just then, the door to the neighboring room opened, and a man stepped into the hallway. He introduced himself as my neighbor and offered his hand for a handshake. I shook his hand, a bit confused, and told him my name before heading into my room. I noticed he went back into his room and shut the door. It struck me as odd that he would come out just to greet me, but I figured some people are just friendly. I unpacked my small suitcase and duffel bag, then lay on the bed and turned on the TV. It was late, and I was tired from my flight, so I planned to go to bed early. After a quick shower, I turned off all the lights and tried to sleep. About 20 minutes later, I heard the neighbor's door creak open. I saw a shadow walk by my door, but it stopped just before passing my room. Through the small light under the door, I could see the shadow get closer for a moment before backing away and continuing down the hall. This creeped me out, so I got up to make sure all the locks on my door were secure before going back to bed. The next day, I met my coworkers at a company building for a presentation and dinner. I didn't get back to the hotel until 10 p.m. and was really tired. I tossed my work bag on the bed and jumped in the shower. While I was in there, I heard the distinct beep of the electronic door lock unlocking. I knew it was too late for cleaning services, so I immediately thought of the strange man next door. I was scared and didn't know how he could have a key to my room. I stood silently, listening as the door slowly opened and then closed, followed by footsteps walking past the bathroom door. I was terrified because they had to know I was in there. I quietly stepped out of the shower, trying not to make noise, and quickly put on a pair of pants I had on the floor. I locked the bathroom door and pressed my ear against it. I could hear faint noises, like someone searching through my bags. I wanted to confront them, but I was frozen in fear, not knowing if they had a weapon. Suddenly, the room went silent. I didn't have my phone with me, but I thought calling for help might scare the person away. I took a deep breath and started banging on the bathroom door, yelling for help as loud as I could. I heard the man's footsteps run past the door and back into the hallway. I quickly got out, locked the front door, and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. After calling, I also contacted the front desk to let them know what happened. By the time the police arrived, the man was already gone. Thankfully, they found him in his car a few hours later. I'm not sure if he faced any consequences for his actions because they couldn't prove he meant to harm me. I honestly think he was trying to kidnap me, as I can't think of any other reason he would enter my room knowing I was there. But I guess we'll never know for sure what he intended to do. Every summer, my family and I would go on vacation to a different hotel and resort. It was usually me, my wife, and our 2 little boys. We spent most of our time at the resort instead of going out, which saved us money since we didn't need to rent a car. It was nice to relax and escape from everyday life. When we arrived at the hotel in the morning, we unpacked, and the kids immediately wanted to go to the water park. My wife and I sat by the pool while the boys played with other kids at the water park. After about 2 hours, we decided to head back to our room to get ready for dinner. I got up to find the boys, and after a few minutes, I found Sam, the older one. I asked him where Alan was, and he said Alan was playing with another kid on the other side of the park. I told Sam to run back to Mom while I went to find Alan. I searched for about 10 minutes and started to get nervous when I finally found him. He was in a back corner talking to a small boy who looked about his age. Next to them were a couple who seemed to be the boy's parents. I introduced myself, but they only smiled slightly. After a moment of awkward silence, I told Alan it was time to leave for dinner, and we headed back to the hotel. On the way, Alan told me something strange. The boy had introduced him to his parents, who invited him to dinner that night. I found it odd that someone would invite a young boy to dinner without talking to his parents first. I told my wife when we got to the room, and she was worried too. We ended up grabbing a quick dinner and returned to the hotel around 5 p.m. The kids seemed tired, so we planned to relax for the rest of the night. We took the elevator up to our floor, and when the doors opened, Alan's new friend and his mother were standing there, as if they had been waiting for us. The mother smiled and asked if Alan could join them for dinner. I looked at my wife, and we were both confused and concerned. I told her we had already eaten, but maybe we could work something out for tomorrow. The mother's smile faded, and she walked down the hallway. Once inside our room, we told Alan not to go near that family without one of us. He seemed upset but agreed. I also talked to Sam and asked him to look after his little brother if we weren't around. We all took turns showering and then relaxed on the bed and couch for the rest of the night. I was annoyed that our vacation was already stressful, but I hoped things would get better. Later, we got ready for bed and turned off the lights. There were 2 beds in the room, one for my wife and me, and the other for the boys. A few hours into the night, I was shaken awake. I saw Sam next to me, shaking my arm. He whispered that Alan was talking to someone at the door. I jumped out of bed and ran to the front door. I could see Alan trying to unlock it and heard a faint voice on the other side. I yelled for him to back away, and he jumped back, scared. I slammed against the door just as I heard footsteps running down the hall. I finished unlocking the door and swung it open, but I only saw a quick figure of a man turning the corner toward the elevators. I tried to catch up, but when I turned the corner, he was gone. He wouldn't have had time to take the elevator, so I knew he was staying on our floor. After looking around for a few minutes, I ran back to our room, where my wife was already awake. I told her to lock the door while I went to the front desk to report what happened. By the time I got to the lobby, my adrenaline was fading, and I was trying to calm down to explain the situation. A young woman at the counter called a security guard and her manager to help me. After a few minutes of discussion, it was clear they couldn't do much. They had no security cameras in the hallways, only at the entrances and exits. I didn't have any proof or a description of the man at the door or his connection to the parents who asked about dinner. I assumed he was the father of the other boy, but I couldn't.